warm welcome to our speaker guest, Shri Ratish Nanda ji, and also Dr. Harold Goodwin. And also I would like to welcome all the viewers and those who might join in some time. These webinars, this is our 5th webinar in the series, and we have been organizing these webinars to aim at spreading the work of responsible tourism in India. And that is why this ICRT India was founded. And I think for the past 4 webinars, we've had different sessions explaining the concept of responsible tourism, and then moving on to understanding how it has helped in different areas by participation from regional people from different parts of the country. So since last webinar, we have also started a regional webinar series where we are inviting the ground practitioners to share their experiences, and particularly focusing on how we can deal with COVID, because that obviously remains a very, very difficult topic for the present. And I think we are receiving many queries and questions in relation to COVID and how to deal with COVID for those who are related to tourism industry. So I think we'll come to that sooner. And before I pass on this interview to Dr. Harold, I may just give a brief introduction on our speaker today. Shri Ratish Nanda is the CEO for Aga Khan Trust for Culture. And in 2020, this year, they also won the Responsible Tourism Award under the category of Best Social Impact Project. And this was for the Nizamuddin Urban Rural Initiative. So I'm sure we will know much more about the project and about how the work is going as Harold will be interviewing Srinath. So may I just pass on now to Dr. Harold Goodwin to take this forward.
Thanks, Manisha. I'm going to beg your indulgence, and before we just start the interview, can I remind everybody that this year's Responsible Tourism Awards are open only until midnight on Monday. So if you haven't yet applied and think that you ought to, please get your nomination in by midnight on Monday. We will close then and not accept any further nominations. Ratish, I remember very well seeing your application come in and opening it up and thinking this project is going to win. And that was because it is, in my view, so outstanding that it was unlikely that there'd be anything else in the set of applications that year which would come close. It's not often that happens, that you get an application which is so outstanding that that there's no chance that anybody else will beat it. That doesn't quite mean that you're the best in the world, but it certainly suggests that you're right up there amongst the very best. So enough of me congratulating you. Let's come back. Now, you got involved with, the Aga Khan Trust for Culture got involved with Humayun's tomb as part of your Regeneration of Cities program of work. And Humayun's tomb, as I remember it when I first went there, which would be before you became active, because I think you were first there in 97. Yes. I was there before. And it was a pretty depressing place to visit at that time. It was quite badly run down. But do you want to just take us quickly through what happened when you became involved in 97 and the activities that you were engaged with?
Well, yes, Humayun's tomb was put on the UNESCO World Heritage List in 1993. And one of the conditions that UNESCO had imposed on the Archaeological Survey of India was that the gardens should be restored, the Mughal garden should be restored. And till 1993, there had not been any garden restorations carried out in India. And the Archaeological Survey of India invited the Aga Khan Trust for Culture to undertake this garden restoration. His Highness the Aga Khan gifted the Humayun's Tomb garden restoration to India on the 50th anniversary of India's independence. So we first became engaged with the garden in 1997, and the MOU was signed because it was the first ever philanthropic donation involvement at any of India's national sites, and sadly remains so. from 1997 till 2003, we implemented the garden restoration. It required, and the culmination was the flowing water, which immediately led to 1,000% increase in visitor numbers. From 100 and when we started, it was 160,000. Today, 2 million plus people visit Humayun's Tomb.
So you started with the gardens, and then I think you came back to start to work on the monuments within the site?
Yes. So it was in 2004 that the Government of India requested further public-private partnerships and in the field of preservation. And that was of great interest to His Highness the Aga Khan. And as a result, we started engagement with the government. We were offered, believe it or not, we were offered a choice of 50 sites. Every site, important site in India except the Taj Mahal was on that list. But Harold, what we did was we requested that we be allowed to continue work at Humayun's Tomb, which was also not on that list. And the reason there were two primary reasons for that. One was that we thought the work was incomplete, having only done the gardens and not done the building. But wherever, as you're aware, the Aga Khan Historic Cities program, wherever we work anywhere in the world, we like to couple conservation with the social economic development program, so that the work that we do helps improve the quality of life in these communities next to us. And that was not really possible in most of the sites in India, such strangely. So in Nizamuddin, in Humayun's Tomb, we have a settlement where people trace their link with the site for 700 years now. And so for the last 12 years, we've been working on the monuments, creating large open landscape spaces, and very intensive work with the community to improve the quality of life.
I want to come back to your engagement with the community in a minute, Ratish.
Yeah.
And let me preface what I'm about to say by saying that it's incredibly unusual for people involved in the restoration of cultural heritage monuments, whether they're gardens or buildings, to do anything to benefit the local community. And that, I think, is the very exceptional element of what's happened around Humayun's tomb with the Nizamuddin project. But just before we talk about that, there's been quite a lot of controversy, I know, about the COVID outbreak attributed to Tablighi. Can we just clear that out of the way so that we can then continue with the other elements of this?
Yes, almost in early March. So there is the international headquarters of the Tablighi Jamaat in the Nizamuddin area. They usually have large congregations. Again, the Nizamuddin area is extremely dense, and to have such a large building with such large congregations is both unwise, unsafe, and so on. But nevertheless, it is there. And quite early on in late March, what did happen was that there was a suspected outbreak. About over 2,000 people, I think, were vacated. But we have ears to the ground, and even 10 days before the Tablighi outbreak, we had been informed that this was in the pipeline, that people had come from elsewhere, that they had symptoms. And we have had a very large health program in the Basti, and a lot of health volunteers. So over 10 days, we had a 10 days head start, and we were able to start awareness and spreading and so on. Remarkable as it may sound, or in the whole period of the lockdown, all 70-75 days, when Nizamuddin Basti was unfortunately a containment zone, there has been not one case of COVID positive, not one case in the community. And that's really got to do with two facts. One is the community realized its threat, and took a lot of precautions, the health workers, and we distributed free masks in every household. We assisted the government of Delhi doing a house-to-house survey, and then followed it up by 5 other sample surveys. A lot of our usual workers, the tour guides, the women who make craftsmen, the food, the women who are chefs, all had really lost their market, and everybody was focusing on COVID relief. So we were able to raise money, invest our own money, and through the lockdown provide food and essential supplies, including sanitation material to about 700 families. And so far, so good.
What you seem to, congratulations on that, Ratish. That's clearly a major effort. But what I'm hearing in the background of what you're saying is that this is a community which has a strong sense of its community. It may be within a larger city, but this is clearly an area with a strong sense of itself as a community. Is that a fair comment?
Absolutely. Nizamuddin Basti is hemmed in by all sorts of traffic arteries and so on. Most people in the Nizamuddin Basti were very saddened, angry, upset about the stigma that followed from the Tablighi Jamaat thing. And the stigma came to them, and it came to Nizamuddin, it came to Muslims. And that was very sad for them. And I think that also helped. In fact, the Dargah, the main shrine in the Nizamuddin Basti, was really closed long before official lockdown. They initiated that themselves, and it has remained so. It remains so close to date to pilgrims.
Thanks for that. And no doubt there will be some questions, I'm sure, about it. But let's carry on and talk about the work that you've been doing there. Now, can you explain first, Ratish, why the Aga Khan Trust for Culture does anything at all with local communities? Because most groups who are restoring cultural monuments don't pay any attention to the needs of the local community. So why bother? I don't want the answer just because we're decent human beings. What is the argument for doing it?
You see, Harold, if you look at the countries we work in, if you look at the regions that we work in, Asia, Africa, and so on, and just like India, we cannot afford to ignore the fact that that conservation does not help and improve quality of life. It is part and parcel. I mean, to the extent that we would probably have not worked at Humayun's tomb had the needy population and Nizamuddin not been there. So for us, that is as much bread and butter as working on history. We look at culture multi-dimensionally, and Nizamuddin has 7 centuries of culture that's represented in food, in cuisine, in craft traditions, in music. It's a fantastic place. It's talked about, this whole this whole Ganga Jamuni culture of brotherhood really starts from Nizamuddin. Some of India's greatest poets are here, Khusro, Rahim. But just to answer your question, since the 1970s, His Highness the Aga Khan's been talking about the fact that conservation culture needs to help improve quality of life rather than just focus on individual monuments. So we never focus only on individual monuments. We look at a very large basis of our work. We take what UNESCO now calls the historic urban landscape approach. So not only do we look at monuments and people, we also look at facilities, access, often things that nobody else does. And since for over 20 years, conservation professionals have been talking about linking conservation with the Millennium Development Goals, Sustainable Development Goals. But unfortunately, that's not being implemented. I was about 5, 6, 7 years ago in a meeting in Japan on this very aspect, and there were 500 conservationists in the room and not one person who was talking about social economic development. But that has to change, and we are trying to show how that can change.
It is interesting to me, Ratish, that the biodiversity conservationists are streets ahead of you, not you as an individual, but you as a collective group of cultural heritage conservationists. You're just not there at all. And I think the difference now is quite shocking. And I'm certainly not criticizing you because you are there, but so many of the colleagues you work with just don't get it, do they?
No, and we also need to jump on the biodiversity bandwagon as heritage. See, if heritage in India has any future, it needs to shed its elitist tag. It needs to sort of say, okay, we're not here to fix the palaces and the forts and the great monumental buildings. but it's the people's heritage, and we need all the friends we can get, whether it's people in the development sector, people in the ecological sector, and we need to learn a lot, as you say, from people in the ecology sector.
Can we just pursue this a little bit further? And forgive me, Manisha, for picking away at this, but I was very struck, Ratish, that you said you'd had a long list of sites, and actually Humayun's tomb wasn't on the list of sites, and that you looked at it and there was nowhere else in India where you could do this kind of project where there was still a living cultural heritage related to the site around the site.
It's shocking, yes.
Really the case?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we looked at several sites, and we couldn't see that. What in the end also worked in Delhi's favor is its access, easy accessibility. But in terms of the only other site that when we were doing our grading got larger grades for potential community impact was Bidar in Karnataka, Bidar in North Karnataka, where the community is sort of resident with the heritage. But to get to Bidar takes 2 days.
Yeah.
And when you're doing a project on this scale with national and international consultants, you don't want to be traveling for 4 days for 2 days of work.
Thanks. I mean, it is disappointing, I think, that so many cultural heritage monuments, outside of the religious buildings of the world, many of our cultural heritage monuments have lost any connection with living culture.
Absolutely, and it's partly to do with how conservation's happened in India, in the sense that when buildings like Humayun's tomb were built, all the way till the 19th century, these were maintained by families of craftsmen who were resident at the site, who earned their revenues from what the estate offered in terms of fruit and vegetable sales until the Mughal times donations. But that system was really dismantled when the Archaeological Survey of India was formed, and engineers and architects took over who had no clue on how to fix buildings. And since the British times, we have been trying to save our buildings from our own people. And that's been a huge self-goal.
So in terms of the work you did at Humayun's tomb, were you able to use a lot of local craftspeople to do that?
Unfortunately, Harold, we started with the belief that we will use local craftspeople. But what we have since realized is that the building craftsmen really travel for work, and they have done so since centuries.
Yeah.
So nobody in Nizamuddin was really interested in stone carving or any of that tough work. But what we were able to use is local youth. We were able to train them in the making of tiles, handmade tiles. Now, this tradition had been lost in India. Tile making tradition had been lost in India. So we got these craftsmen from Uzbekistan and who spent a year with us. And because we needed to train people, that was something the youth did. But all the training programs that we've held with Nizamuddin youth have been really aspirational. So they've learned software, hardware, video editing. They become chefs and beauticians, but not really craftsmen.
One of the things that always worries us when we give an award, if we haven't actually visited the site and there's nobody on the panel who's been there, is that we'll get there and be disappointed. But I have to tell you, one of our judges did go there unannounced and came back raving about how fantastic what's been done in Nizamuddin is. Now, you and I have talked about this before. The next time I come to Delhi, I'm definitely going to come and visit because I'm really keen to see it. But am I going to be able to buy some of these tiles and bring them home? Absolutely.
In fact, what we're doing is we're trying to do a museum, and we are hoping to keep the craft skills alive by making souvenirs using these craft traditions. So you'll not only be able to buy a tile, you will be able to buy a souvenir, which could be a wall hanging hook with the same tradition of the tile making.
So Ratish, if I asked you what you think the major achievements have been of your involvement with the local community, what would you want to respond to that. What have been the big benefits for the local community?
You know, Harold, when we started, this area was really seen as a ghetto, a Muslim ghetto. And today, I'm confident that this place will continue to thrive. The COVID situation has pushed us back 2-3 years because a lot of the young people have lost their jobs in the retail sector, as beauticians and so on. But we've been able to raise a lot of money right now so that we're making sure that people are continuing to be fed, and we will be retraining a lot of them over this year. But I think what gives me greatest joy with respect to the community is that when we started, the team implementing the project was 100% from outside Nizamuddin. And now I think if we employ about 120 people working in Nizamuddin, about 95% are from Nizamuddin. So the program is really being, whether it's the local chefs, whether it's the Inchai Noor embroidery and women making nice notebooks like that, all of the people who are managing the community toilets, the parks, the health workers, almost everybody is from Nizamuddin.
One of the things I remember from the application, and I was really pleased to see it, was the focus on the unique dishes and the culinary traditions of Nizamuddin. I mean, it was very striking that those culinary traditions have been maintained. Is that still working? Is the local food still available?
Yes, we've just see, the point is there are a lot of eateries in Nizamuddin because there is such a lot of pilgrimage. I mean, Humayun gets 2 million visitors. Nizamuddin gets about 4 million visitors a year. So there are a lot of eateries, but I wouldn't eat at most of them. And one of my colleagues really started this program as a nutrition program. We were quite aghast at children buying chips and all sorts of other packaged foods. So it really started as a nutrition program. And then we said, okay, let's, for Eid and so on, we started distributing some of the kebabs these women would make and so on. And today we have a full state-of-art kitchen. It's been shut for many months now, but very happy that today is Eid, and for Eid we've been able to send some kebabs to lots of friends and family from the women, and it will thrive because these women will have a space in Sundar Nursery and so on, and they're home delivering. So they're quite popular, and again, one of the big achievements was that it's hilarious, but Hyderabad is known for its biryani. And I was shocked that these women were really invited by a 5-star hotel in Hyderabad for a week to serve Hyderabadi's Nizamuddin biryani.
So these dishes which are being cooked in Nizamuddin, you can actually trace the heritage back, can you?
It is very local. It's some things that we would never have outside Nizamuddin heard of. And kebabs and nihari are, of course, to die for. But there are also a lot of vegetarian dishes and so on, which have been quite a hit. I mean, my colleagues who run this program, 2 of them are vegetarian, and I keep shouting at them for trying to get these women to make vegetarian dishes. But the vegetarian kebabs are also very popular.
I'm just going to ask 2 more questions. So all of you are out there listening, please get your questions into Manisha. Ratish, how many women have benefited from this? What's the proportion of women who benefited as against the men from that local community?
Well, Harold, I mean, I think we owe a lot of success to the project, to the women of Nizamuddin. I think it's been incredible. We've done a women park. We've done women's toilets. So when we started, a lot of people did not have in-home toilets. We've since built a lot of in-home toilets. We have a huge emphasis on women's health. We've got about 100 women making embroidery and craft products. We've got women chefs. So a lot of, and the women toilet is much better than the male toilet because a lot of my colleagues are women. And I think, I mean, and to the extent that some of the more orthodox religious leaders have been used to sort of us spoiling their women. But if the imam sits on Friday prayers and curses her, and his wife and daughter both work with us, he doesn't have the same amount of impact. I shouldn't be saying this on air, but I think essentially in our estimate, we've done 3 baseline surveys. In our estimate, we've benefited almost 99% of the population in Nizamuddin. I couldn't tell you offhand how many are women and how many are men, but the women really had the rough end of the stick over here as the youth. So a lot of our emphasis has been on women.
Ratish, I realised as you were talking that I perhaps asked the question the wrong way round. And have any of the men benefited?
Yes, a lot of the youth have been men. We've created gymnasiums for both women and men. We've everything. I mean, the men are really the decision makers. So, I mean, in terms of a lot of our work, it's urban, it's out there, it's streets, it's parks, which is used by everybody. But we just try to do something extra, something special for the women.
Rupesh, it seems to me that there are considerable similarities here between Kumarakoram and this Nizamuddin area. It'd just be fascinating for you to visit each other's projects and have a walk through them together. But my last question, I think it'd be a lot of fun to do that. My last question is this, Ratish, how replicable do you think what you've done is? Am I going to see some more places doing this? Or is this going to remain one of those wonderful but unique projects?
Well,
I told you there'd be one hard question. This is it.
This is, I mean, actually, Harold, I think a lot of people ask us about, a lot of people assume that working with the community has been the difficult part. That for us has been the easiest part of the project. Once the initial fear, see, when we started, there was a fear that we will get people out because they're heritage zones, we will dislocate people. But essentially, we are putting out there all our learnings. We've got a very detailed website. We are trying to put a lot of stuff on publications, and it can be easily redone, easily replicated. A lot of people think that, oh, this has been possible because the Aga Khan, His Highness the Aga Khan's put in so much more money. But that's not the only reason. I mean, His Highness's patronage has been incredible across the world. But that's not the only reason. I mean, I think the critical factors for replicability is set up a partnership. I think government spends a lot more money trying to do these things, but does not partner with civil society agencies. You need an interdisciplinary approach, and fundraising today is, hopefully COVID will get over. Fundraising will once again become possible for this sort of thing. But, the Aga Khan Trust for Culture could easily be replaced with, say, a university or a residents welfare association, and so on. In the terms of
Ratish, you are undervaluing the skills which have been developed by you and your colleagues.
Yes, but those skills are
going to let you get away with that.
Those skills are going to be out there for everybody to replicate, and those skills are available in an agency such as a university, which can couple with corporates and government. So essentially, what is critical to replace this is a public-private partnership, which includes a government setup, which includes a civil society agency, and which includes corporate funding.
Ratish, I suspect that when you go and visit Kumarakoram with Rupesh, and I hope you will, and I think when Rupesh comes and visits your project, one of the things you will find, which is also essential, is a strong local community with good democratic traditions. And I suspect that both of these areas, both Kumarakoram and the area where you've worked, have that. And that's a fundamental part of it. And unfortunately, quite a lot of places don't have that. And it makes it much more difficult.
Yeah, well, Nizamuddin, actually, Harold, you'll be surprised, has a lot of diversity. People bunch Nizamuddin as one, but it's not. And we have to often deal with different community groups or interact with different community groups separately.
Right. Okay, well, that'll be interesting to see. Thank you very much, Ratish. I'm going to hand back to you, Manisha. You have the conch now. It's your program.
Thank you so much, Harold, and thank you so much, Ratish. It was a really good insight into the work that amazing and incredible work that you've been doing, and it's really good to know more about it today. While we've been hearing this, we will also have received some questions. So I would like probably a viewpoint on few questions from both you and Harold. So there's one question which is more related to COVID, but someone has, because the topic for this today's webinar was benefiting the disadvantaged through responsible tourism. So one question which has come is how socially responsible companies and organizations can help in assisting those who are impacted by the COVID situation. So today there'll be more questions related to COVID, I'm afraid, but may I just have your viewpoint, please?
Sure. You see, it's been such a devastation. And can you imagine being in a containment zone for 75 days, not being able to step out of your neighborhood? So it's been very tough. But more than anything else, people have lost jobs. People have lost any means of livelihood. The stigma associated with where you come from has led to more job losses. And the situation is not getting better. A lot of these people will never get their jobs back. So now is the time where every sort of help is required. I mean, of course, at the very minimal, to make sure that people's get good good diet and access to healthcare is absolutely important, and that itself is becoming a challenge. So, and anybody can help with that. The second is people need training, need retraining, need to sort of find new opportunities, especially if God knows when the hairdressers will open again and when the malls and will start retailing again. And finally, I think there needs to be a lot of effort in terms of to remove any stigma associated with the disease. I mean, Nizamuddin not being so badly affected by the disease itself as it's been affected by the stigma associated with the disease. And only God knows how long that will take to be rectified.
Yeah, that's true. Harold, any views from you about this question? Because it's again a question related to COVID and how you think that organizations can be. I think from this point of view also this question has come that whether, what would be the way to approach or find some help to any social organizations or, from this question is primarily from a ground practitioner. So from that perspective, what will be the best way to contact or get in touch for help?
There are opportunities, but they're all very difficult. If you look at what's happening in Europe, there's been a big increase in domestic tourism, but with the situation with COVID in India, you're certainly not ready for that yet. We've got, it's pessimistic to say this, but I think it's the reality in Europe is that places are opening up and then closing down again very quickly as the number of cases increases. So this is certainly not going to be over quickly. And I think finding alternative employment is important. I suspect, although I don't know, that one of the advantages that particularly the economically poor in India have is that they tend not to be reliant only upon one source of income. And I think those places which have become very dependent on tourism have got a particularly problem. I'm not in any way trying to suggest that the problems are not massive. They are massive, but they are even worse if you're entirely dependent on tourism at the household level. And that for me is a piece of learning that we should all take from this, that tourism is a vulnerable industry. It's a great additional income, but it's certainly at the household level, you should endeavour not to be entirely dependent on tourism. You need to have a source of income which will continue even when the tourists stop. The other possibility, and we are seeing that in the awards, it's one of the reasons we did the awards the way we did this year, is that there are some outbound travel agents and tour operators who are fundraising amongst people who've been to these places to get support for the community or for the wildlife or the culture in the destinations that we love to visit. But that is a very crowded marketplace, and it turns on finding tour operators who you can work with to get those messages out. And I guess Nizamuddin in particular has the disadvantage there that it doesn't have a long history of international visitors actually going into Nizamuddin in the way that some, well, Kana or Ranthambore or Keoladea would have a much longer history of that. But you know, it is a dreadful situation all over the world, and it's not going to be over quickly.
Yes. Well, thank you, Harold. Going on to the next question, I think this is again a bit related to the post-COVID scenario. And, you know, someone has asked that what are the plans for your organization to attract more tourists in the post-COVID-19 scenario? So that they can get some idea about how they can probably start promotions, Ratish.
Yeah, I think Manisha, what's happening is that for us, Nizamuddin, Sundar Nursery, and Humayun's Tomb are all interconnected.
Yeah.
And we're hoping that you know, because COVID is not really affected when you're indoors and outdoors, and that and you know, everybody wants food and music and so on. So for longest time, I think we will be trying to target people from within Delhi. Almost none of you of whom have been to these places. Humayun's Tomb gets about 60% foreign visitors, and so and that's probably not going to happen for another year or so. So I think in many things that we were going to start aimed at foreign visitors will have to be redone aimed at Delhi people.
Okay. In terms of, you know, because this question has also come from a couple of people who have asked that, you know, when people are involved in any responsible tourism initiative, the communities particularly, they seem to be probably more prepared to deal with situations like COVID because they have the right, you know, concept in their mind about tourism. So do you think that your initiative in Nizamuddin has sort of proved that to a certain extent?
I think what is different from us is that there are, of course, you know, there is our Heritage Youth and Guide program, and we're not going to get school children visiting Nizamuddin or anybody visiting Nizamuddin for a while yet. So we will put in this time and this effort into retraining them into more things, into how to walk people through the museum when it opens next year, for example. But I think very quickly we were able to use the skills, you know, skills used to make embroidery, to make masks. So they're doing brisk business, making masks and providing them to the community. Similarly, diversifying into things like Rakhis and so on. So yes, I think what is critical is that when people are so engaged with one another, when there's such an inclusive group, you're able to sort of, you know, find a way out. Also, a lot of these groups had a lot of savings, which, you know, over the years, these women would earlier not earned a single penny in their lives had collected, and there was collectively a lot of saving. So they've been able to dip into those savings and sort of survive the last 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
What worries me though is the next 4 or 5 months when people's savings are almost all exhausted.
They're already exhausted.
By no means seen the worst of this yet.
Yeah. No, and or I mean, there some studies are saying India will be worst affected by October, November 2021. So, you know, God knows what you believe in. But yes, I mean, I think the worst might still be out there. Worst might be to come, and we need to sort of you know, take measures that will see us through, that will help us survive this period.
Yeah. So just one listener who's there, you know, here in the audience, he has asked a question. Sir, do you find any difference while restoring a World Heritage Monument, which is also regulated by the conservation guidelines of UNESCO? And
I see the question. So I think Mohammed Arman, what is critical is that the UNESCO designates these sites as World Heritage. UNESCO does not get engaged with day-to-day oversight. Having said that, UNESCO has a very well written out operational guidelines that explains exactly how a conservation process should happen. So in that sense, there is no difference between doing good conservation, whether you're doing it for a national monument, an unprotected monument, or a World Heritage Site. So what UNESCO is demanding is good conservation, and that stays the same. So what we've been able to do in India is, or in Delhi and Hyderabad where we work, is to establish how good conservation should be done. What is the conservation process? It should be based on scientific research, archival research, closed documentation, a written out conservation plan that is peer reviewed, and a high level of supervision. And that is not different from anybody. It should, whether it's a national monument or a World Heritage Site. What UNESCO demands and must get, otherwise the World Heritage status is under threat, is to do a very high quality work of heritage. So, one of the things, Manisha, is that when we started in 2007, it was only Humayun's tomb that was inscribed on the World Heritage list. 10, 11 years after we finished, in 2016, UNESCO agreed to expand the World Heritage list to include 12 monuments that we had already conserved. So the state of conservation had been improved, and that, as a conservation professional, was for me a big sort of recognition.
Yes, it's a huge congratulations for that, because it's not easy work to do that and reach that stage. So it's really, the whole congratulations has gone to you.
Thank you.
From Anup Kumar, also there's one question. Many workers are returning back to their native places in rural areas because of pandemic, and what be the techniques, especially in tourism industry, to at least impart human touch and impart employment opportunities? So I don't know, this is a very general question, so maybe both of you can give your viewpoints.
I think he means people who have returned to the rural areas, for them. Yes. So that is obviously a challenge when people are, in our kind of work, you can't really work from home. It is out there, it's on the site, it's tools and everything. And yes, a lot of our craftsmen also left. Through the pandemic, through COVID, we had 200 craftsmen whom we made sure got their food every day and their salaries through that period. But after the lockdown lifted and the trains started moving, a lot of them obviously wanted to go back to their families and have done so. Some have begun to return, but it will be many months, years before they all come back to the same extent. But I think COVID has very quickly got behavioral change, made behavioral change happen. And people will be taking that care. The good part about a lot of people who work for us, the craftsmen, is that, as Harold was saying, craftsmanship is sometimes their secondary job. Yeah. Often these people are farmers. Yeah. So they are able to go back to their villages and so on and continue or return to farming for this period. So they are which is one of the reasons that they don't want to come back in a hurry. They have things to do. They have some sort of way to feed their families and so on.
Yeah. So Harold,
I would just, if I may, Manisha, I'd just like to emphasize that it is extremely important that anyone who's involved in tourism who is economically poor, and I'm saying deliberately economically poor because often they're culturally very rich, but those who are economically poor really need to make sure that they've got diverse incomes within the household so that they do not become dependent only on tourism. It's a very dangerous place to be.
Yes.
Who would have thought?
Sorry?
I said, who would have thought? Who would have thought that, this would happen? Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't want to be pessimistic about this, but the World Bank points out that there are these kinds of virus outbreaks multiple times every year. Some of them will become pandemics. It may be 100 years since we had the last one, but we've had a number of other very serious outbreaks which we managed to contain, but which, had they become rampant across the world, would have been equally disastrous, possibly more so. If you think about Ebola, for example, if that had got out of West Africa. we'd all have been in deep, deep trouble.
Yes. So I mean, all in all, what we've discussed today gives us, this direction that in future also there'll be a lot of lessons to be learned from COVID, and one of which is, of course, being too over dependent on tourism, which obviously is the basic principle of responsible tourism, that you are not over dependent on it. So and of course, creating more sources of livelihood alongside is very critical and important. So, I mean, before we, I think there are many other questions which might we'll have to shift them to the next one, because those are very general and more or less related to COVID. And I think we've touched upon the main questions which have come for today. And before we close, we would like to just mention a small initiative, a campaign that we are likely to start soon, which is being called ICRT Connect. The reason we are starting this is because in our last webinar, when we conducted a regional webinar and invited, ground practitioners from Rajasthan and from Assam, and in general, we felt that there is a very big need for people to connect to some people and, at least share their problems and get some ideas from each other. So it's more like linking them together. So I think it's a good time for us to start this campaign. And we will be probably sending, phone numbers and emails where people can contact ICRT. We don't necessarily will have many solutions to every problem that comes, but we would like to make it more an exchange process where people can probably do some experience sharing and learn from each other and try to find solutions to what COVID has brought this whole thing for us. So I hope everyone will support this, as this will be starting very soon. And I think, yeah, Mohammed Rahman Arman, as you've seen his messages, I think people are very thankful, Ratish, for your being here today.
Pleasure. Thank you.
It's been really nice to have you, and we hope we'll be in touch to know more about your work and be able to like to see it also and witness this.
Sure. A lot of our work is already on social media and websites and so on, but all of you are welcome to come and we'll walk you through.
Thank you so much. That's really kind of you. And if any one of my colleagues, George, Rupesh, and Soiti from ICRT, if they have anything to ask as a final, then we'll have to close the session.
Yeah, I have no other. Sorry, George, you please start.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. True. I'm through.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Soiti, you're there?
Yeah, no, Manisha, thank you. I think Ratish has answered quite a few questions, and I mean, I really.
He's sitting outside in Sundar Nursery having coffee.
Yes, I shall join you soon as promised. But thank you so much. I think it was a wonderful session. Thank you, Harold. Thank you, Ratish. I think there was, at a time like this when everyone's feeling so uncertain, it's good to know that the community has been so incredibly resilient, and that under the current circumstances, Nizamuddin has shown how a fantastic project can not just have visible, tangible impact, but a huge intangible impact. So congratulations, Ratish, and thank you, Harold.
You're very welcome. I enjoyed it very much. It's good to speak with you again, Ratish.
Thank you.
Thank you to all the participants also. Rupesh, were you saying something? Sorry, I think I...
No, I really congratulate Ratish ji, because he already done a good job. And this is a clear, his talk given us a clear idea about the conservation and responsible tourism. What is the linkage between the conservation activities and responsible tourism? And
yeah, I think a lot of people talk about tourism to sites which are really not worth visiting because of how poor the state of conservation is. So,
yeah.
Even before we started talking about tourism, infrastructure, parking, this, that, and the other, we spent about a decade just fixing these monuments. And that is something that will be lead to, for example, lead to tourism and increased tourism year after year after year. It's the goose that lays the golden egg. But if you have a monument which is a ruin, nobody wants to really come and look at it.
Yeah, of course, as suggested by Dr. Harold, I will visit in your place, and you are welcome to our area, Kumaragam and Kerala also. Okay.
Much look forward to that.
Thank you, Ratish. Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Harold.
you.
And thank you to all our viewers also for joining us. And we hope to see everyone soon.